Well, hey, Reunion, so glad you are here today. If this is your first time joining us, we're thankful you have chosen to be with us here. You can find out more about us, reunionto.com, and we encourage you to join in on the online participation by messaging us if you have a prayer request or joining in on the chat. Well, today we're starting a new series called But God. That phrase happens several times, 46 or so to be exact, throughout the Bible. And when you see that phrase, but God, it means that He is intervening. It means that He's going to do something. And I don't know about you, but man, during these times that we find ourselves in, we kind of need this but God moment, right? And all throughout the Bible, we saw characters throughout the Bible that may found themselves in hopeless or helpless circumstances, maybe insurmountable circumstances. And yet there's this phrase that was tagged in there, but God. And then He steps into their circumstances. So I'm excited. Today we're going to have a special guest, and I believe you're going to be blessed by it and encouraged and challenged. But before we get to singing with Kyle and Allie, we want you to join in with us and tell us why and where is your favorite vacationing spot. So join in on the chat box below. Tell us where your favorite place is to vacation and why. Let's do that right now.
What's up, Reunion Church? Man, it's so great to be back with y'all today. Man, I want to invite you to sing out. We serve a great God, a God who is for us, a God who is all-powerful. He created this world, and He deserves our praise. So let's sing out. Let's give Him praise this morning with this new song.
Praise be a weapon that overcomes the enemy. Praise be a weapon that overcomes all anxiety. Let it rise. Let praise arise. We sing your name in the dark and it changes everything. We sing with all we are, victory. Let it rise, let praise arise. We see you break down every wall. You watch the giants fall. The fear cannot survive when we praise you. The God of breakthroughs on our side, forever lift you high. With all creation cries out, praise you. Oh, we praise you. Oh, faith be the song that overcomes the raging sea. Faith be the song that calms the storm inside of me. Let it rise. Let praise arise. We see you break down every wall. We watch the giants fall. Fear cannot survive when we praise you. The God of breakthroughs on our side, forever lift you high. With all creation cries out, we praise you. Oh, we praise you. This is what living looks like. This is what freedom feels like. This is what heaven sounds like. We praise you, we praise you. This is what looks like. This is what freedom feels like. This is what heaven sounds like. We praise you, we praise you. This is what living looks like. This is what freedom feels like. This is what heaven sounds like. We praise you, we praise you. We'll see you break down every wall. We'll watch the giants fall. If you cannot survive when we praise you, the God of breakthroughs on our side, ever lifting high. All creation cries out, we praise you. Oh, we praise you. Oh, we praise you. Sometimes on this journey, get lost in my mistakes. Looks to me like weakness is a canvas for your grace. And the story isn't over, the story's just begun. 'Cause failure won't define me, 'cause that's what my Father does. No, failure won't define me, 'cause that's what my Father does. Ooh, lay your burdens down. Ooh, you're in the Father's house. Check your shame at the door. Sin ain't welcome anymore. Ooh, here in the Father's house. Arrival's not the end game, the journey's where you are. You never wanted perfect, you just want my heart. And the story isn't over if the story isn't good. 'Cause failure isn't final when the Father's in the room. No, failure isn't final when the Father's in the room. Lay your burdens down. Ooh, here in the Father's house. Check your shame at the door, 'cause it ain't welcome anymore. Ooh, you're in the Father's house. Place, the cynical find faith, and love is breaking through when the Father's in the room. Jericho walls are quaking, the strongholds now are shaking. Love is breaking through when the Father's in the room. Love is breaking through when the Father's in the room. Lay your burdens down. Ooh, here in the Father's house. Check your shame at the door. The sin ain't welcome anymore. Ooh, you're in the Father's house. Ooh, lay your burdens burdens down. Ooh, here in the Father's house. And check your shame at the door, 'cause it ain't welcome anymore. Ooh, you're in the Father's house.
Peace be still, calm this soul. I need you here now. Restore my hope. I confess I've been afraid. Remind my heart, Lord, increase my faith. So I will run to the waves where courage comes to take this place of perfect love. Oh, perfect love. Oh, what can take away my hallelujah? No darkness can contain my hallelujah. Your cross has made a way. My hallelujah, my hallelujah. You give life, no man can take, no power in hell can separate. And who can stand against your might, with armies of angels by your side? So I will run into the waves as courage comes to take this place of perfect love. Oh, perfect love. Oh, what can take away my hallelujah? No darkness can contain my hallelujah. Your cross has made a way. My hallelujah, my hallelujah. Nothing can take my hallelujah. Nothing can take my hallelujah. Shadows will fade, darkness will break. I'll keep on singing your praise. Nothing can take my hallelujah. Nothing can take my hallelujah. Shadows will fade, darkness will break. I'll keep on singing your praise.
Nothing can take my hallelujah. Nothing can take my hallelujah. Shadows will fade, darkness will break, and I'll keep on singing your praise. Oh, what can take away my hallelujah? No darkness can contain my hallelujah. Your cross has made a way. My hallelujah, my hallelujah.
Oh, what can take away my hallelujah? No darkness can contain my hallelujah. Your cross has made a way for my hallelujah, my hallelujah. God, thank you so much for your love and your grace and for making a way for us, God. When we don't even deserve it, God, we don't deserve your love or your grace or your mercy, but you give it to us. You outpour it onto us each new morning, God. Thank you for that love. Thank you for that grace, God. Thank you for coming and making a way through the cross. It's in your Son's name we pray. Amen.
Well, hey, Reunion, it's so good to be with you here today. We're going to jump into a time where we give back to Him. He's given us so much already, and so many of you are being faithful by giving your tithes and your offerings, and we want to say thank you for that. So grateful for your generosity towards Him, and I pray that He's being generous towards you. You can do that several different ways. There will be several different links in the chat box, so be sure to check those out and just continue to give towards the mission that we have here, which is helping people find their way home. And while you're doing that, I'm going to let you know about a few things that are happening in the life of our church. First up is last week we had our very first in-person gathering for the first time in I think 5+ months, and it was so good to see you. And we talked about this idea of moving on in the power and authority that God has given us. Just like He gave the Israelites to move on into a new destiny, He challenges us to move on in our own way too. So I hope if you haven't seen that you would go back and watch that video. And then next month in September, we will have our next in-person gathering on the 20th. And so be sure to put that down on your calendar. Today, we're going to go hiking and have ice cream like we have been. Be sure to check your inbox for the location of where we're going to be doing that. And then also on Tuesday, we continue to have our prayer gatherings. We'd love to have you join us at 7 p.m. If you would like for us to be praying for something, man, we would just love to hear from you. You can drop us a message at info@reunionto.com or DM us through one of our social media outlets. And so I'm excited to have you be a part of that. Just come on out, 7 p.m. on our Zoom link that's in your inbox as well. Well, today we are going to start a new series, and I'm excited about this series, even though we're going to be tackling probably some tough issues or a tough topic. And really, we're going to be dealing with kind of anxiety and fear and really what to do in hard circumstances. I think probably most of us have experienced hard circumstances, maybe challenging life experiences. I mean, even right now, we're experiencing some really unprecedented, crazy, hard times. I mean, I don't know how many of you had this conversation, the one that my wife and I did after the first day of school on this last Wednesday. It went something like this on our evening walk. We were both quiet, maybe a little bit more subdued than we normally are on our walks, but I just kind of quietly whispered to her, I just said, "Hey babe, I love you. I love you so much." And you know, she was kind of worn out from being the teacher that day, and she said, "Yeah, I love you," just kind of quietly. And there was more silence, and so I was trying to kind of lift the spirits up, and I was like, "Man, we made it through the day, though. We made it through the first day." And she looked back at me, and she's like, "Did we? Did we really make it through?" And I was like, "Yes, we made it through today. We're going to make it through this semester, just like we've made it through so many other hard circumstances in our relationship, in our family, and just our story." And I guarantee that maybe you've been through some hard situations that you didn't think you were going to get out of, but you did. And so as we start this series, I'm excited to look at how God is with us, even in our tough circumstances. The series name is called But God. And it comes from this verse found in Job 33 in verse 28, where God is kind of on the back end of the story of Job. And there's this verse in the Message version where it says, "But God stepped in and saved me." This is Job talking about what God did for him. "He saved me from certain death. I'm alive again. Once more I see the light." And so in this series, if you're hopeless, helpless, maybe on the brink of giving up, throughout the Bible, there are people who we can look to for inspiration and maybe being challenged even in our challenging times. You know, a lot of their circumstances seemed insurmountable, but God made a way. You know, that word but, B-U-T, is in the Bible over 4,000 times. But when you put that other word / the name God next to that word but God, it happens 45, 46 times in the Bible. And every time you find that phrase, it's when God reaches down or rescues or comes alongside one of His children. And so today we're starting this new series called But God. And I'm excited also about this series because we're going to be talking with a friend of Michelle and I's. She has an incredible testimony, really hard story, really challenging. And yet there are moments along the way in her story where we can find some truths that we can apply to our lives through the Bible and characters that we find in there. You're going to meet a person. Her name is Grace Huang, and back in 2012, she and her husband and their 3 kids, they adopted 2 kids from Ghana and 1 from Uganda. They moved to Qatar for her husband's job. He was an engineer, and the company had recruited them to come to Qatar, and they were kind of excited about the experience of living abroad and exposing their kids to different ways of living, and it didn't go the way it was supposed to go. Let's just leave it at that. And so this video was pretty lengthy, so we kind of cut some of it down. And so you're going to see us meet Grace on the front end, and then you're going to pick up right as we ask her the question, so what happened in 2013 that made things different? And so let's sit in and listen to the conversation that Michelle and I had with Grace Huang and her story. All right, well, Reunion, we are joined here today with my better 99%, Michelle. And so I'm excited to have her sitting alongside with me as we have a conversation with someone who we've known about for a while, but actually are getting to know just here recently, aka today. But we followed her story for quite a few years. And so Grace, thanks for joining us here today.
It is an honor. Let me say, it really, truly is an honor. I was starting to break into tears when we were praying earlier because your story has helped me walk through hard times. And so I just want to say thank you for sharing it with us today.
That's really encouraging to hear. Thank you for inviting me.
So how long was life normal before things were not normal?
6 months.
6 months?
Okay.
Yeah.
And then what happened?
So we moved there in July, and in January 15th, my daughter died, and we don't, like, even now, we don't have a full explanation of what happened. But she was lying in the room and one night, and my husband took her to the emergency room, and they said, and I stayed home with the 2 boys because they were in bed. And so he called and said, there's no heartbeat. They're doing CPR. And kind of this, like, do you want to come? And I'm like, the boys are in bed and I don't have a car. Like, how it just, so I think less than half an hour later, they stopped CPR, and she was gone. So my husband came back and picked us all up and took us to the hospital. Yeah, and then this guy started asking me questions. He had his notepad and he was like asking me, who is that girl? And I told him that's my daughter, and he said, no, she's not. She has a different skin color than you. And I'm like, she's adopted. But it's all, so this is all kind of like, I'm trying to speak in really simple English, and he's doing the same thing, and I don't know if he's understanding me. I don't know if I'm understanding him. But it was just all these questions about, what country are you from? And I'm from the US. He said, no, you're not. Yes, I have a US passport. He said, what country were you born in? And I was not happy to answer that, like, Taiwan. Like, okay. Like, it's just so many things that I just felt like he was trying to get something out of me, but I couldn't do anything about it. And these guys started questioning my boys too.
I know for us Americans, adoption is sometimes like, what is that? Why would you do that? But yet it's pretty common here. But for other countries and other cultures, it's like almost non-existent. So I imagine that was really hard to get for them to understand why you would say that those were your children.
Yeah, I learned later about all the misunderstandings around race and adoption, where I think adoption is illegal for them. You never take a kid and change their name. That's just, if you're not blood related, you're not related. So that's one thing. And then race too. There's all these stereotypes about Asians, about Black people, where we were just didn't make sense.
Yeah.
Gotcha.
So did they take you that night?
So they took us to a police station, and we just waited there all night. I don't know. I think they were talking to my husband that night, and we were just waiting. And then they transferred to another police station. That's where we saw each other again. And so and then the whole day was like more questioning and going back and forth between offices. And then that night they said, okay, we need to do it. We're doing an autopsy, so we can't let you go yet. So you're just going to stay for a night. And once we have an autopsy, then it'll all clear up. So they didn't tell us they didn't tell us they were taking us to prison. They just said, you need to stay for the night. But that's where we ended up.
I can remember, and I'm not sure when your story broke here in the U.S., but I can remember still when Michelle was, I don't know if it was listening, watching, reading, but I can remember her telling me like this was happening to a family. And
because I think at the time we were stuck in the Dominican Republic adopting the younger ones. And so I knew how hard that was for me and for my kids. And I mean, just distraught, like crying and screaming and angry with God, like everything was, just hard.
Yeah, because you can't do anything.
Can't do anything.
Yeah.
And yet I wasn't in prison and you were, and my heart it broke for you. So I'm really sorry that happened.
I think one of the things that I remember Michelle talking about was, like the boys and, just even like the inability to grieve for your daughter, I mean, just all these things that I just can't even imagine, like, to use a cliche saying that I hate using, or that I don't ever like using cliche sayings, but it must have just been like this surreal moment of like, am I living this life right now? Like, is this me? Is this my life? I mean, I don't even know if I'm having a question. I'm just processing with you. Like,
well, sometimes that's how it feels now. Like I don't know. Yeah. But at the moment, you just do whatever's in front of you. I think you just survive.
Yeah.
And there's so many feelings that I just did not even start to process until we got out and got home. I'm still doing it today, like now. And
we're still processing ourselves. And again, we were, and
things come up and
I didn't even realize that part.
Yeah.
And how long were you in prison?
It was 10 months. So we got out in November. And actually, since you asked about the kids earlier, so they were with a friend the first night. And then the second, so the day after we were in prison, they had us give statements, and then they brought the kids back and made them give a statement too. And then after that, they were put into an orphanage, and we were brought back to prison. So, like, even if I was trying to tell them, you know, this friend will take them, and my mom is flying out and she'll take them, but so the boys were stuck in an orphanage for 5 months.
Ugh, I didn't know it was that long. Oh my gosh.
Well, January through May. Yeah.
Wow. And your husband was obviously in a different prison than you, and so you didn't see him through that 10 months. Is that correct?
We saw each other in court, like when we appeared, and then
Right.
that's pretty much it. We wrote
So,
letters.
I mean, we could, there's so many things that I want to ask.
Let me just, so they were charging you with murder, right?
Yes, murder and human trafficking.
Okay, yeah.
Yeah. You know, just some standard accusations. Just so crazy.
They were sure, like, it's something about harvesting organs or something, and like that we didn't feed the kids, and we were going to sell them, like all these things, and not even our lawyer really understood.
Was there just like a moment where you were just like at the bottom, and would you share that, or do you? I don't know.
It was when my kids left the country, and you know, it's so hard because it should be this really great thing. Like my family has been working to get them out. They've been like working to be able to like have the kids leave the country. And yet for me, it was like, I felt like, okay, now everybody's leaving me. Like now I'm here all alone. And because I think that's when I always had this like idea of what coming out would look like. Like we're gonna walk out and we're gonna like all the family's gonna be together and we're just gonna have a like
nice family reunion.
Yes, and the kids will be there. Like that's what it. And that was when I realized that wasn't gonna happen anymore.
Yeah, I can't imagine. I just can't imagine. And so if that was like your lowest moment, and I've read through, what's the blog, your blog's name?
It's my name, Grace Chinhall.
I read through some of the different posts that you wrote. What was something that gave you hope during this tragically hard time? And again, people who are listening to this, you may not be incarcerated, or maybe you have been, maybe you have, or you haven't lost a family member. But I think that's the beautiful thing about God and our stories, is that they can help bring healing to others. And there is hope even identifying within a story of somebody. What was something that gave you hope along the way? Because it seems almost like a hopeless situation. But what brought you hope?
You know, it's a weird thing to explain, but I felt so loved when I was there, when I was in there by myself. Nobody saw me. And it was like, I just felt Jesus's love. And I can't even explain that. It's just, it's tangible. And sometimes it's through people. A lot of times it was just through people, and I don't think they even knew that was how God was loving me. But yeah, just random things that maybe someone sent to me that I hadn't even thought I needed, but it was like just the right thing.
Yeah,
Um,
can we talk just a minute about some of those things? Because again, I think in our culture, even though we're on this shutdown pandemic and we um, are distanced from people, we still have, I think, the tendency to say, oh, what I would do for that person wouldn't matter a whole lot to them. Or writing a note to somebody or calling, just like very basic things.
And let me say, I want you to tell, like, if you don't mind, like, you wrote a blog post about the flip-flops. Can you like, because that just
okay.
got to my mind, and I just when I read it, I was just like, oh my goodness. Like, and you said it, like, he saw you and he saw her. Can you tell me?
Okay. Yes, and then I do have, and then I answered the other one too. Yeah, this was pretty early on, like, and there's days, like I shared my low, but it's like it's just constant. It's this, like, there are days when I just feel like I cannot do this one more day. Like I can't stay here. I have to get out. Like I don't, I don't even and it was one of those days, and I'm just like, I can't make it. And then and a guard called me and handed me this plastic bag. And it's not visiting day, so, but it meant that one of my friends had been outside and she had brought something. And so I looked in the bag and there were these flip-flops. Like, I don't need flip-flops. I already have shoes, and like, that's interesting. Like, I'm glad she was here and all that, but what am I supposed to do with this? I don't think I've even walked all the way in when this other woman came and said, Grace, there's a new person here, and she doesn't have any shoes. Do you have anything you could lend to her? I'm like, oh, yes, I do. Here, these are for her. So yeah, it's like, there's no way my friend would have known that, but God knew.
Right.
And he knew I needed it at that moment too.
Yeah.
So yeah. And then, like, to answer your question too, Mark, just I was thinking of, so when my boys went back to the States, it was this woman this friend who came to tell me, because she had me in contact with my family. So she came to tell me, and again, it's one of those unexpected things. Like, she wasn't supposed to be able to visit. She just came to drop off a letter, and the guard said, why don't you go see her? So she came in and she had brought her two boys too. So they got to see, like, I got to see them. And so she was able to tell me in person that my boys were out of the country. And her family, they were the ones who, they went for a week and did, for their experiment, they did prison cooking. So I had, I prepared food with a thermos of hot water because I didn't have a kitchen or anything, and I wanted to have vegetables sometimes. And so that's what they did. Like, they decided to just kind of do the same, like, try to imagine what it would be like to live like me. And I think that's what it is, like, just God, I think, put it on people's hearts to really imagine what it might be, like what I might need, like what they would need if they were inside, what they would want. And so they were able to think of just beyond, like, the things I asked for, like the really basic stuff, but to things like sandals, which or yeah, there's a whole bunch of stories of things that people sent that I could not have even imagined asking for.
For the sake of time, I don't want you to be thinking if you have a closing question. But one of the things that we talked about before we pushed the record button was this, and telling that story about your friends who ate prison food or did that experiment. They wanted to know what it was like walking in your shoes, basically, right? And so, one of the things that I think for people during the season is like, well, where is hope actually found? Where do we find it? And sometimes being a conduit for hope for somebody, even in our hardship, is how we receive hope ourselves. Because it was almost, I have to believe, like when you had the sandals and then you were able to be a giver of God's grace to somebody else, that I have to believe kind of lifted you to some degree. That even in like this lonely, isolating place, God still saw fit to use you to bring hope to somebody else. And then conversely, you had some friends on the outside who wanted to identify with your story. And we were talking about, Michelle, tell just the short version of the facilities team and the church and that we were talking about this before.
Yeah, we were talking about how a lot of times in churches, they don't like to, it's difficult for churches to take kids in their children's ministry that are difficult. and sometimes behaviors can be rather large. And so I went to a breakout session of this one where the facilities ministry, they counted it a ministry instead of a job to patch the walls that this one kid punched through every week. Every Sunday, he punched a hole in the wall. And instead of giving him back to the parents and saying, he's not welcome here anymore, or we can't, he's too much for us, we're not equipped to handle him, they counted it as a ministry to patch those walls and pray for that family. Because you better believe that family has holes in their walls at home as well. And so that was a way for this man to identify with the family a little bit
and live their life
for just those few moments, to help bring empathy, because it got mundane to monotonous to patch that wall every week. But it's also the same for you to have to cook food that way, and how hard that must have been. But they suddenly experienced it, even though they didn't have to. But they decided to experience it with you so that they knew how to help you. And I think there's so much beauty in that when someone is willing to walk with us through that.
I think what I want to encourage us or remind us of is that what I hear in that is even Mark 10:45, where Jesus came to serve, not to be served. And one way that we can bring hope, one way, and is by serving somebody. And serving somebody may mean that you're patching a hole. It may mean that you identify with them by taking a class about depression or trauma or whatever it is, that you identify with their life by learning and living in their shoes, even if it's just for a short period of time. And I think that's where hope can be found a lot of times, and these hard stories that we have as humans at times.
God shows up in a really intimate way in the really hard times, and whether you're the one who's in it or you're the one supporting someone, like, I think when you're joined together like that, like, you both experience what it is that God's doing. because it's not just like this person helping this person. I think we need each other to see God better. And so it's like there's things that I wouldn't have been able to see if my friend didn't show God's love in that way, and they wouldn't have even known they were showing God's love except through what I've experienced. So like both sides get to experience that together. And the other thing I wanted to add was, I think how they knew these things was, I think they were praying for me a lot. And like as we are praying for people and just enter into whatever it is that's on God's heart for them, that's when you just end up doing things that are very God things.
Yeah. And may seem out of the ordinary, may seem totally bizarre, right?
Mm-hmm.
I mean, why did that woman bring you sandals? but she was listening, right?
She was listening. And I have to say too, as like your story is so hard. It's a hard story. It's a hard story for me to hear, especially as an adoptive mom, because of, we all have fears, and it's like your story was like, oh my goodness, I can't believe God would allow that to happen to you. And yet you said something that I didn't expect you to say. And you said that you felt Jesus's love in those times. And that, even to me, even though I know a little bit of your story, I'm like, that's shocking to me. Like, that's shocking to me that you felt his love. And that just tells me that he's real. And that prayer really does work.
Yes. Like it's shocking to me too.
Mm-hmm.
I can't explain it. But yes, like there was so many times I thought, I think people are praying for me. This feeling is not normal. Like this is not, it's just not. It has to be from God. And it's because there's people praying.
No. Well, Grace, I want to finish, unless you have something you wanted to add or share. Earlier, P.S., by the way, reunion, I just wanted to leave the room and let these people, amazing ladies, talk, because I generally have little to offer once these conversations start, and they're just dropping big, massive truths. But you'll have more of those hopefully over the next couple of weeks. But I want you to hear something, as we've heard just a brief snippet of Grace's story, and that is that God's story is so much bigger than just an individual's. And even in these little anecdotes that Grace shared, that God is weaving this story that's 100 times, 1,000, million times bigger than our own personal stories. And Grace, her story was weaving in and through her friends and guards and other prison mates, and yet also at the same time 15,000 miles away in the Caribbean. It was touching and encouraging and inspiring us as a family. And so reunion, you never know how your story fits into God's story sometimes, but I want to encourage you that it does fit in, and that it will be used and can be used because of the power of Jesus. And so, Grace, thanks for being willing to be vulnerable and take a step of faith with a couple of strangers. But I'm excited to have you on over the next couple of weeks to learn more about kind of this but then God side of the story that you're going to share, and we'll learn how we can implement some things into our own lives. So thanks so much, and I'm going to put you on. All through God's word, as I said there at the end of the video, we see stories and hear these stories in the Bible that remind us sometimes of our own stories. Sometimes there's despair, there's betrayal, there's hardship, there's depression. And sometimes when we're in the middle of our story, it's really hard to see how our story will be impactful or how will we get out of this circumstance. Today, I wanted to be able to share Grace's story to give context to what we will talk about in the coming weeks. I'm excited about that. I'm excited about what you might be challenged to do and how to bring hope to others, even in the midst of your trials. Remember what Job said in verse 28 of Job 33. He said, "But God stepped in and saved me from certain death. I'm alive again. Once more, I see the light." And today, friends, I want to encourage you that God is there with you. Even when you may not feel like it, He is there walking right alongside next to you. Stay tuned for next week as we continue our conversation with Grace and as we look a little bit deeper into the Bible, what God might have to say to us in our challenging times as we look at this new series called But God. Have a great week.